Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right, I just realized I was on mute for a second. So, this is Joshua Kemble's live stream. This is episode 298. We have a really exciting show. Today, we're going to continue the non-spicy streams. So, I've been doing some spicy streams as of late. Last two streams, we did a little thing here. Let me turn this down just a little bit so it's not conflicting. We did a little bit of interesting stuff on the last few streams where we went through a couple questions for artists that I think are really cool and led to some really cool conversations in chat. So that is the plan today, ladies and gentlemen. That is the plan. We are going to be working on finishing colors for page 78 of Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So that's what I'm going to be doing art-wise. And we're going to be doing more artist questions that I encourage people who are watching to actually participate. So it's a lot of fun when I hear your guys' answers to these questions as well. And I'll put those questions in the comments section. So it's a midday, early day. I'm really excited about it. And let's get into this stream. And flat coloring and answering some questions that are common with artists. If you notice that my bouffant of hair is gone, that's because I cut my hair this morning. It was just getting long. So let's get into it. Let's get into the stream. It should be really exciting. And again, low spice stream. This is just going to be an art hangout where we're going to work on art. This does not mean the end of spicy streams. It just means, it's time to do a little bit of hanging out. Let me know how the audio is if you're listening. I'm trying a few new settings, and so I hope they're okay and they're not like blowing out entirely. You're going to hear in the background like the fish tank kind of bubbling, as well as my boy running around being goofy. So I'm excited. Before we get into art, I have a few updates. So tomorrow I'm meeting up with an author who has sold quite a few books. I think a couple of his books have sold over 1 million copies. And we're going to talk about potentially collaborating on a project. So one thing I need to do tonight is read the script for the thing we're going to be meeting about tomorrow. And also I need to decide on a restaurant in the area that we're going to meet. We're meeting at like a halfway point between where I live and they live. And so I have to like research restaurants that are affordable in that area because I don't know. I'm not familiar with that area. So that should be really exciting, but we'll see if we end up working on a pitch. If so, I'm really excited about that. The idea of kind of getting that out there. Other than that, we're just going to kind of continue going through our artist questions. So if you're watching, welcome. Welcome to my stream, and let's do some art hanging out. And I think I'll put the first few questions that we already answered on previous shows. I think I'll go ahead and throw that in to the chats. Let's see here. Cool. Okay. So I think we've gotten through 7 of these. So I'm going to go ahead and throw them in the chat. So I'm just numbering them real quick. So you guys, if you haven't answered these questions, you can go ahead and answer them. So I'm just numbering them real quick. And this should kind of recap the questions we've done so far. So we're going to go ahead and... Wow, okay, that YouTube split him into a couple comments, so you guys can kind of go from there. And then this will be the new question that I'm going to put in the chats. We'll be addressing question 7. Got a dry throat this morning. Question 7. So I've put question 7 in the chat, and I'll be addressing that in a second. So that's kind of one of the things we're going to do is kind of continue doing some of these artist questions, and we're going to get into working on comics. And here we go. So, okay, this is everything that's in magenta has yet to be flat colored. Everything that's not magenta has been flat colored. I got so enwrapped and interested in Jim Lujan's stream where he had Gary Hodges on as a guest. They're good friends of mine, and it was a really fun conversation to listen to last night. And honestly, I didn't get a lot of flatting done while listening. I was just enjoying the process of listening to it. The one thing that I've done is color held the line Teatro Niccolini, so now that's got color on it. And that's just a matter of painting over the line. That's all color holding means, is just painting color over your lines. And now what we're going to do is go through and try to color all of these areas that are magenta. So we're going to kind of get into that. And a lot of this is going to be transferred color from the previous colors of the previous pages. And we're just going to go and try to get through all of these 4 panels before I can get to anything else today. I kind of showed this off on stream last time, but this little to-do list thing is really amazing. I love it. And so I've got my to-do list written for the day on my tasks, and we're going to just kind of check through those. But the first thing that I need to do now, I worked out, I cut my hair, and now it's time to color this page. So and working out has just kind of like become like an essential. I've never been like a gym guy, but I just find that it's really helpful for my mental health. And I encourage actually artists, because we're at desks all day, like doing just small exercise is really helpful and helps your keep your mind in the game. So yeah, so that's basically where we're at. I have my coffee, I have my water, and now we're gonna work on colors, and we're gonna address this first question. So if you're watching, feel free to chime in the chats. As I know a lot of our audience are artists, and I love hearing your guys' answers to these questions. I've listed the first 5 in the chat, and now we're getting into question number 7. The first 5 I answered on Livestream 296 and 97, just in case you're curious. So 296 and 97 episodes, we addressed the first 5. And number 7 is the new one, and it's how do you define success as an artist? So I'm curious to see how you guys define success. And I'm going to think about this for a second while we start flat coloring. So the first thing I'll probably start with is the Teatro Niccolini sign. And I'm just going to pull that color because I picked a color that works really well for it. We actually have photo reference of this too, which I'll pull up as well. So there's our photo reference, which is kind of great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work on the Teatro Niccolini sign, and then we'll work from there while I think about this. I guess we'll just think out loud. So how do we define success as an artist? Success is a really weird thing to kind of define. Again, this is going to be a non-spicy stream if you're just tuning in. We're trying to just have a conversation about art. But some of these conversations will have implications. One of the things that kind of bugs me in modern times is the fact that like there's a real focus on monetary worth in life in our society, and I think a lot of that's a result of capitalism. And again, I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm not a fan of unhinged capitalism, but in general, I tend to be one of those weird guys on the left who thinks that outside of like things where the profit motive breaks down, like the profit motive doesn't work for everything. I don't think the profit motive works in the case of healthcare. I don't think it works in the case of like fire departments. I often don't think it works in the case of like law enforcement, like legal enforcement. I don't think it works in the case of like mental health, because technically one could make the argument that profit could drive people to want to keep people mentally unwell. Profit could drive people to keep people sick. Profit can do some really dangerous things if left unregulated. Anyhow, this ties into the success in art thing. Trust me, guys. And my own philosophy. I want to hear your philosophies as well. Frank said these sound like table topics questions from Toastmasters, Art Masters. That's right, Frank. I want to hear your take on these things too. So to me, like the over accentuation on profit to define someone's worth in our society, it makes a lot of sense in a capitalist context because, in a kind of Ayn Randian dystopia that we're finding ourselves living close to, it's like people start finding their value in what they can contribute. And to an extent, justifiably so, right? Like there is a part where it's like to be a good citizen of a society, you should be wanting to contribute like something. But it breaks down when it comes to things like, if you're elderly, then your contributions, in the marketplace are probably going to be declining. If you're disabled, your ability to contribute to the marketplace will be, basically a problem. If you're out of work or just down on your luck, it can be a problem, right? Because a lot of our society is only defining worth based on what you can contribute. And a lot of friendships, too, are based on like an equal exchange of like, hey, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And some of this can be good. It creates friendships and situations where like people aren't preying on the good nature of other people. Because I'm not going to pretend we're not in a world where people don't take advantage of people's good nature for sure. But it also kind of creates this false identification of people's worth. Because in my opinion, a human being's worth isn't defined by just what they can contribute. I don't think that like when a human being can't contribute to our society, they lose worth. And I think that actually leads to a lot of mental health problems because when everyone's running around feeling like they have to contribute, when they're put in a situation of like joblessness or aging or you know getting a disability, they can feel like they don't have value in society, and they're treated very much like that by a lot of people in society. And so this is why I'm kind of disturbed by movements like there's like this whole red pill space online where it's all about like self improvement, and at its best, it's probably about like men self improving. At its worst, it's about your value is your net worth. And when your personal worth starts becoming your net worth, that's a problem. It's a problem on multiple levels because it's just been seen throughout history that people who are extremely wealthy don't get the sudden solution to happiness. It's become like a trope or a truism where it's like wealth is not going to solve all your problems. And in fact, quite a lot of people, when they do get wealthy or successful, find themselves in weird positions. Like a good example would be somebody like Robin Williams, who, was easily probably the biggest in his field that you can get. I don't think you can get any bigger than that. And yet was plagued with depression. And I think a lot of people kind of in a corporate um, uh, capitalist society start defining their worth based on these things, based on material wealth and maybe like what you're contributing to society. And quite often, people who achieve the ideal that they've been striving for their whole lives find themselves in a position where they now have all the things that they were striving for. They now have all the clout or the influence or whatever, and they still find themselves feeling a lack of purpose or meaning in their lives. And so I think it's just, I know I'm just kind of glossing over the point, but my point is if material wealth is why we're here, I think everyone will commit suicide. Well, everyone will off themselves if that's the only purpose in life. And I think it's a really dangerous thing to make that everyone's goal. I think if your goal in life is just to attain massive amounts of wealth, I think you're going to live. I personally think you're going to live a very unfulfilled life. My connection just dropped out for a second. Am I still there, guys? I don't know if my memory is being kind of weird. I'm hearing myself, but it seems like the connection's lagging. So let me know in chat. Um, a lot of this is probably just because like working on these flats takes up a lot of memory on my computer. Okay. Anyhow, let me know in chat if this is still coming through, if our connection's still okay. Cool. Frank said, "You're here. You didn't drop." So my whole point is just I don't think wealth can be the purpose in life, and therefore I don't think that wealth can be the only definition of success as an artist. I think it could be part of it. I know there's a lot of research that shows that there is a specific amount of money um, that people can earn a year. I think it's like 70,000 from what I'm sure it's like 80 now after inflation. That people like if they make under that, it actually does affect their mental health. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're just constantly in fight or flight and you're struggling to know where you're going to eat or how you're going to eat or how you're going to feed your family, that's going to take a toll, right, on your mental well-being. And I think to an extent, one would call that a success if you're able to, feed yourself. That's being a part of being a successful human, I guess. However, let's say somebody was disabled and was an artist. I don't think they would be not a success because they can't feed themselves with their art. Like, let's say somebody was a disabled artist. I just don't think wealth alone or the obtaining of money could be our at least for me, my definition of success as an artist. So I got to rule that out. It's kind of weird. It's like I'm almost trying to answer this question in a long-winded way, as I do with anything, where I'm trying to rule out what is success not. Like what can we what would it be tempting to say success is, and then look at and go, huh, can that be success? Because it comes to mind, I think, okay, a successful artist is somebody making money off of their art, then I'm like, can it be that simple? Because thinking about it, I don't think that can be the measure of success for an artist. Nice. Frank said, I haven't answered 3 to 6, but I'll give a simplistic answer to 7. Success to me is in sections. Section 1, I find it's successful when I'm able to create something when I've been dragging on. Nice. And then Frank also said, starting and finishing something is a big success for me. And section 2, being able to sell my art constantly, that's a huge success. I've made mini comics for a couple of years and recently. And I think he's continuing that thought. Yeah, I mean, I think wealth has something to do with it. Like, I think being able to kind of hustle your wares, being able to kind of like make a living as an artist is definitely, something I would factor in there, but I don't think that can be the sole defining factor of a success in art. So I'm like, also, if I defined it by that, then I'd have to say Van Gogh was a failure, right? And I don't want to go down that path. Like, I think Van Gogh was an excellent artist, a very successful artist, even though in his lifetime nobody really understood it. So it's like, okay, but do I want us all walking around thinking we're Van Gogh? No. Like, we should be trying to make a living. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to make a living doing what we do. So could success be popularity? That's another thing that comes to mind, is like, okay, so have you succeeded when you gain notoriety or popularity? And that, again, like the Van Gogh thing just kind of rules that out for me as like a sole measure. Like, sure, having fans or people who appreciate your art. What happened, Ben? You bonked your leg? Yeah, so like I think that would be hard to I'd have to kind of rule that one out. I think gaining fans or a following is probably a very good thing. None of us, I think, even Van Gogh, like, if you read his letters and stuff to his brother, which by the way are publicly accessible and are very informative and cool. But even if I look at those, it's like I don't think Van Gogh was hoping to not sell paintings. He really wanted to sell his paintings. It actually kind of broke his heart that he wasn't able to sell his paintings. And it wasn't like he didn't want a following. He was kind of brokenhearted about the fact that people didn't seem to get what he was working on. And he was quite often very frustrated because he felt like the only people who recognized him were other artists. Because he did have a lot of artists that were supporting him and interested in what he was doing, but the general public just didn't get it. And so, I guess like having community might be a factor for what people would consider success, but could I consider it a factor for success? And I don't know, because again, like there's that scenario of a lot of my favorite bands were never recognized during their time. Like, meaning like, a lot of my favorite bands like broke up and failed. And then later people came along and were like, oh my gosh, this band's genius. How did this band exist and nobody cared about it? So I feel like, and I can also think of a lot of examples of artists that I feel personally I look at and I think are failures that are very successful. They're very successful, but like their art kind of fails to speak to me. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean for themselves they're not a success. We're just talking about my own definition of success. So I'm like, okay, I got to dig deeper on this. Ralph Contreras is here. How's it going, Ralph? We're doing a non-spicy stream. We're doing just kind of, you know, we're doing a non-spicy stream where we're working on flat coloring, and we're talking about how do we define success as an artist? How do you know when you've reached it? And it's a funny question because I find that, maybe I just overthink things, but for me a question like that is really heavy, like, to answer. So what would success be for me? I think I'm going to go out there on a limb and say I think success is when you try to when you're trying to communicate something and you go out with the intention to communicate it and you effectively communicate it. I think that in itself, is kind of the act of art, is going out with something you want to visually express, expressing it, and expressing it effectively. And I feel like if you do that, then you're successful as an artist. To me, the artists that I look at that I would consider successes are artists that are out there working hard, effectively communicating what they're trying to communicate on the daily. But it's a hard one even with that, right? Because maybe, I know some artists that are incredible. They're incredible, and they would never feel like they've really effectively communicated what they had in their head, even though they're incredible, and anyone would look at them and be like, oh my gosh, you're a successful artist. And a lot of those people feel like they're always reaching for something that's not there. So that's a tough one too. Frank said he sold quite a few packs of mini comics, but it wasn't huge, but he was happy to sell them. He said some of those comics didn't sell at first, but now it's paying off. I didn't make hundreds, but I made enough to pay a bill or a meal or some art supplies. I'm able to make more art. I pre-sold a sketch card because of the other card I make. I think that touches on something. I feel like to me, I think if you're making a living as an artist, I mean, you have kind of cheated the system in a good way. And, I think at least as far as being a commercial artist, that would be successful. As an artist, I feel like if you're in a scenario where you can continue to make art, I think that's a big sign of success. I think being able to continue to make art against all odds is a big, to me, indicator of what I would consider success. Like, if I'm able to continue making comics, then I feel like I'm succeeding. But I also feel like if you can set out to do something with intention, you set out to communicate something, and then you effectively are able to communicate it, which is, I know, is a slippery term. What is effective communication? But I feel like that would be, to me, probably the number one indicator of success as an artist. If I look at artists that I admire, one thing they all have in common is they're very productive. They put out a lot of art and they're succeeding at it in the sense that they're still putting it out there, hell or high water. And to me, that's a success. I think it's one of those weird things where it has to be broken into categories, because I don't want this to be one of those things where, like, people will, like, listen to this and suddenly feel like, well, I'm not a success. So, because at the end of the day, I think that, my wife kind of said this when she walked by, but I think success is kind of a self-defined thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with what goals you've set for yourself, and whether you've done what you can within your power to kind of achieve those goals. So if that's like a financial goal, then maybe that's how you define success. If that's in my case, it's like making a good book whether people like it or not. If I feel like I've done a good book, I feel like that's a success. Um if I'm able to continue making good books, that's a success. Or making my damnedest attempt to make a good book, I guess, would be kind of a part of that. But it's funny to me that, again, we're in a society where I think a lot of the time people are really encouraged to do things for monetary gain. And if they're not gaining money, then it's kind of cast aside as if it's some sort of absurd, pursuit. And I feel like that's a real misguided thing in a society that's like worshiping dollars. It's like it's such a slippery thing because at the end of the day, people on their deathbeds aren't usually talking about, man, I wish I had made more money. Generally, I think the most common thing people on their deathbeds say is, man, I wish I had spent more time with my kids. I wish I had, enjoyed the time that I had more. Quite often, I don't think people are like regretting, oh my gosh, I didn't make enough money to an extent, unless they're like literally starving to death because they're broke. I just, because in those cases, obviously, you'd be like, man, I wish I had made more money. But but I think that like this kind of consumerist, um, capitalist like structure, you know, that again is can be really healthy for commerce. I just think that people make a big mistake when they mistake commerce for value. And like by value, I mean like human value. Because there's a lot of things that sell in the marketplace that are absolutely valueless. Like they're not going to contribute anything to anyone. And maybe just like a brief moment of entertainment. And somebody found value for some reason, but I don't think dollars is how we can kind of do it. Philip said, your big hair is gone, Josh. I know I mentioned that at the top, but I will say it'll come back. My hair grows like a chia pet, dude. So it'll be like 2 days from now, it'll be like a big afro. You can't contain this hair. It just goes. It will go where it's gonna go. Today I just had to tame it back because I was like, it's out of control. So Ralph Contreras said, I think a form of success is just believing in your own ability and putting your work out there. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of it's like coming to a point where you not being delusional, but being really honest with yourself can look at your work and feel like you have achieved what you wanted to achieve with your art in the ways that you can control it. And don't get me wrong, we all would like probably to make a bunch of money off our art. I think anybody saying they wouldn't is full of it. But I think there's something innately more important than that when it comes to art. And I think a lot of that ties somewhere around communication. And I wish I could kind of put my finger on what exactly that is. But it's an interesting question to me where it's like, how would I feel successful? I feel like one of my goals, is like I would like to get to a point where I have a full bookshelf full of my graphic novels. But I'm under no delusion that if I achieve that, I'm going to be able to like kick back and be like, haha, I've hit success. Because if there's anything that I can guarantee about success is it's very illusory and slippery. Because in my time as an artist, I have found that some of the most well-paid work that I've done is not work that I look back on and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did that. Um, so I feel like for my own personal success, I feel like money, is obviously important, but I don't think it really measures a successful piece of art, because there's a lot of stuff I've made for money that I would be okay with being in like a junk pile. Like it wasn't like anything I was like super attached to. And that doesn't mean I didn't do a good job on it. It's just like I don't think it can just be money. But I also think it's kind of almost like a you're never going to really reach success as an artist. That's another thing that I really hold true and believe. I don't think anyone's going to reach a point where they're like, haha, I've succeeded, and continue to make art. I feel like if you hit full success, you might just retire or quit art. But I have this weird feeling that success is this very slippery thing that we chase. And I'm not saying I'm above it, because I think I chase it too. And sometimes it'll be like little goals, like where it's like, okay, I want to make money off of my art. Okay, cool. I reached that goal. Well, now I'd like to make a little more money off my art. Okay, so I reached that goal. Okay, now I'd like to have this many people read my stuff. Okay, I've reached that goal. Well, now I want this many people to read my stuff. And I've met guys that are at like the top of the ladder and they're still chasing a goal. Like they might like again, like when I was in the National Cartoonist Society, there were guys who were like Oscar nominees, and they're still chasing the goal. They're like, yeah, but like I could do this or I could get this. So I kind of think the idea of success is a very illusory thing, and I think it's okay to accept. And this is a struggle I have as an artist. It's okay to accept when you feel like you have really succeeded. Um, I think a lot of the time success is kind of measured in a way where we're almost peer pressured. We're almost peer pressured into, not feeling successful. Like you might have somebody who just comes down and like knocks you down a peg. Like you feel like, man, I finally finished my first book. And you feel really successful about it until you talk to somebody and they're asking you about like sales numbers and stuff. And you're like, man. Or you feel really good about your sales numbers until like somebody else comes along and tells you about their sales numbers or something like that. I feel like there's a lot of envy that people have when they answer these kind of questions. But I definitely think success is self-defined. I think it's kind of more about you and your personal goals. And in my opinion, if you're constantly like, to me, a successful artist, here's a big kind of wiggly definition. To me, a successful artist is somebody who's showing up every day and trying. It's like, to me, somebody actually making work, number one, finishing work, number two, and number three, trying. I think trying has a lot to do with it, because I will look at somebody who's trying with more respect than some wealthy dude phoning it in and getting paid a ton of money. To me, the person trying to make art, like trying really hard, is noble and successful in my opinion. Yeah, so now I'm kind of curious what you guys think. Thinking about it, I don't have a solid answer to that. Which I know is not fun, but it's something I need to think about more. It's a good question. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about it, and what you kind of define as success. Let's see here. So I want to do. Okay, we're gonna do some real quick stuff here, where we're gonna do. Okay, I need to like deselect a few things. I need to deselect this. I need to deselect this. So today, for me to be a success as an artist, I would like to finish this panel and this page. I would like to finish my flat on this page. I'm not thinking much further than that at this point. Okay, let's see here. I need a darker color. I need a darker color. There it is. This area back here is kind of in shadow, so I want to keep it toned back a little bit with the grays. But yeah, I'm really eager to hear what your guys' answers are. And again, like I was going to say, you know, if you so feel moved to kind of talk about it, I have a list of the questions I asked at the beginning up top. Frank said, I just gave you a 3-part essay about how I define success. Oh, we didn't get to part 3. Okay, section 3. Ralph Contreras said, I think a form of success is, okay, we already addressed that. Just believing in your own ability and putting your work out there. Okay, this is Frank. Section 3, inspiring others. When somebody tells me I inspired them to make art or do something that they don't think they could do, I find that successful. I do think that must have something to do with it. Making some kind of dent in like people's perception or their day. Yeah, like making some kind of positive dent would definitely, I think, for a lot of people, that's what they would kind of, one of their measures, you know, would be somebody got something out of it. But then that would be kind of weird because if that's the full reliance of success, I think it's self-defined by everybody. But then if you're on a desert island and there's nobody around, would you not be able to actually make successful art? That's a whole question too. I think art has something to do with trying to say something about this weird state of being that we all experience, about consciousness, about these like slippery ideas that are really hard to define. I think art has a big role in that. I know, I get all like heady and weird about this stuff, but I think about it. Like I love questions like this because it makes me think. And I'm not super quick to answer. I'm kind of thinking it out loud, you know. What is that, you know? It's an interesting question. Speaking of the devil, we have gotten a little bit further on this page. Kind of digging how it's coming out. I want to use this lightest gray on the base here of these columns. For one of these. Let's make it for 2 of these and maybe the top. I'm really eager to hear what you guys think and what your thoughts are on this particular question, you know? It's an interesting one. And again, we're having a chill stream today, so hopefully you guys are getting some art done. You know, making progress on your own personal projects. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on today. And I need to save what I'm doing so that I don't have to recreate it in a few seconds. So let's, I like that. Let's do this kind of deeper gray. Now keep in mind, I'm just doing flats on a layer below my shading layer. My shading layer is like above, so the final kind of looks more like this, which I think looks pretty rad and very like Victorian, kind of old school. But right now what we're working on is just getting those flats filled in. And I think we're doing an okay job at this. I do want to do the windows here, and I want to hear what your guys' answers are to this. Philip said, "I can hear you, but the image is freezing. I think you're caught up now." Okay, that was back when there was that blip. We got a really active chat today. It's kind of fun. Frank said, "Ralph, thank you. That means a lot to me. I've recently felt like I've been disconnected from the community, but I've been trying to get back on track." Well, Frank, we appreciate you, man. I feel like you're very connected to the community. Frank said, "I'm happy that I can make stuff and put it out there, and if it makes someone happy, great." And then Ralph said, "Right on, Frank. I see you everywhere. I usually just lurk in the background or listen to YouTube videos on Rewind. So I'm trying to be more outgoing like you, dude." Well, thanks, Ralph. You're doing a good job at that too. Thomas said, "People sometimes forget the journey is more fun and interesting than the destination." I think if you get lost in the sauce, this is my own opinion. I think if you get lost in the sauce of forgetting that the destination's not part of it, when you get there, you're going to be really disappointed. Because the weird thing about the human pursuit of excellence is I think it is like it is us compensating in a weird way. It's us pursuing excellence as people. My own personal philosophy is what we're designed to work, I think. And I think we like goodness, and I think we pursue goodness. But I think at the end of our pursuits, we're always going to feel this absence of goodness, because I personally believe that there was a state where humans were always around goodness, and we're away from that. So like inevitably, we're going to be like kind of filling vacuums that can't be filled. And that is kind of our lot on this earth. So that's me getting all dark. But I really do believe that. So I kind of think that if you're under the illusion, like, oh, if I get this, like, I like guitars, for instance. Guitars are amazing. I don't think I will ever have enough guitars. I enjoy guitars, but I'm under no illusion that, like, if I were the wealthiest person on the planet and could buy 200 guitars, I don't think I'd ever fill that void. I think I would always enjoy and want new guitars. I don't think guitars are ever going to fill that void for me. Nor do I think anything else will, and I think people who think these like material things are going to fill a void that's like more than material, they're in for a sore disappointment. Let's see here. So Philip said, "Have you seen the animated film about him? I think it was called Loving Vincent. Is that the one where they painted every frame? I still have yet to see that." So I agree with Thomas about the journey is kind of like the point. I think that the destination's not always going to work. Thomas said, "I agree about trying. When I was a teacher, I made sure special ed students that tried passed. They probably should not have been in physics. They knew it, but they tried." Nice. RSC Arts Ralph said, "Vincent has amazing animation." Yeah, it was like all painted. They hired a bunch of oil painters. It's crazy. Frank said, "My goal for today to feel accomplished, I need to edit and publish a video for Roll for Tarako." Nice. You'll get there. Philip said, "Just speaking for myself personally, I have to be able to support myself as an artist. If I'm not, then I'm working a job that is just taking away from time I could be working on art." I understand that. That's the ideal. And that's something I would like to continue to be able to do. I've done that for 20 years, and I hope that continues. I hope I can continue to like support myself and my family with my art. But I also know some pretty amazing artists that I would consider successful that could not do that. So it's weird. It's like that might be something I'm aiming for, but I feel like I don't know if I can call that a barometer for success for myself. Let's see here. We are filling in this Bosco poster, getting into more detail on it. I kind of want to finish up these background panels here. And we're almost at the hour mark. When we get to the hour mark, what I'll do is play a trailer for one of my books. And if you guys haven't yet picked up one of them, I really highly encourage you to check out what I do. I put a lot of heart and soul into the comics I do, and a lot of years as well. And so, you know, I'm pretty proud. So when you see these trailers, I really would encourage you guys to do that. I also will say, since we're almost at the hour mark, there's about 5 people watching right now. If you can, hit that like button. It helps to bring more people to this stream. And honestly, like the more people who are kind of contributing their own takes on these questions, the more fun these conversations are. So I really appreciate all of you guys and whoever's hitting that button. It's completely free to do. I would really appreciate it. Well, let's see if we have more answers here. Frank said, it's not a simple solution. There's nuances and balances. I'm not happy if someone doesn't say good job, Frank. It's not daily, but hearing I made a difference in some way, it's an added boost. I kind of agree with that. I think that also has to do with a personality thing where we're basically like some of us have different like love languages, And I feel like those of us who need encouragement, I'm definitely one of those people. For me, like verbal affirmation is a big deal for me. Like I am very driven by that. I'm a very verbal person. I kind of think out loud. Like you guys can probably see that on these streams where it's like I literally think things through while talking. And it's not always the best to have that in my personality, but that's just the way I am where I think while I talk. Whereas a lot of people kind of like think and then they talk, or they're not as auditory at processing, whereas I am. And so for me, hearing encouragement goes a really long way. Hearing feedback goes a really long way. Um, you know, Whereas I know for some other people, it's like very much action oriented or service oriented or something like that. And I'm one of those people who I'm like, I really need like verbal affirmation. I need to hear that I'm doing okay. And this just goes for like everything in my life. Um, but I also know some people who like they could care less to hear it. They want to see action or something. And I kind of understand that because like words can kind of, what is it? George R. R. Martin says, words are wind. It's like there is to an extent there is like a little bit of that. Where yeah, it's like it can be kind of cheap and easy to give a word and not to give actual support or something like that. But words go a long way for me. Um, let's see here. We're right now kind of selecting this fence. I thought, okay, we are selecting this fence. And we're going to kind of fill around the fence. So that's what I'm working on right now on this strange panel. We'll get back to the Bosco thing in a second. And I want to go ahead and... Okay, there's a couple things going here. Did we fill the fence correctly? Now I'm like, oh no. Did I fill the fence? Okay, I think I did, but I think I accidentally used... Okay, well, we'll figure this out. Here's what I need to do. I need to... Okay, we're going to do the window kind of behind the fence. I'm going to go ahead and deselect this. I don't think it's really that far behind the fence. I think I accidentally color filled the other fence the right color, but the color behind it the wrong color. So we're going to kind of rectify that in a second. What I'll do here is I'm going to magenta this business that I haven't color filled yet. And then I'm going to go over here and we're going to put it on continuous. So we're just selecting the one spot and the colors behind it. And I think what I'm going to do is make this like one of the darker shades, but not quite as dark. So that we can have the fence be the same color as this lighting fixture. All right, problem solved. Yay. And I think we're at about the hour mark. So I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer for Jacob's apartment. And we'll continue. I have more questions too. I really want to know your guys' answers. So if there are questions that I've put out there on the last 2 streams that you guys haven't answered, feel free to look above. You can kind of check them out. I listed all 6 at the top. Jim said, I wanted to state officially for the record that Billie Jean is not my lover. She's just a girl that claims that I am the one. But the kid is not my... Okay, anyhow, we're going to play... How dare you, Jim? How dare you? That ignited just my Michael Jackson singing. Okay, here's the trailer for Jacob's apartment. I'll be right back, and we'll finish up the flats for this panel. Clearly it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams.
Let's get ready to crumble!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are tuning in to Joshua Kemble's live stream. If you haven't yet, hit like, hit subscribe, the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. We're on episode 298, and we're working on flat colors for Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the historical fiction graphic novel that I'm working on illustrating for Turner Publishing. And we're going through some questions for artists, and I'm kind of encouraging participation of people in the chats as well. So here we go. We'll continue. So I think that Ralph actually said his answer to question 3 was pencil art is my favorite medium to work in. Comic book art is my inspiration. Nice. Jim said earworm achieved. Nice. Yeah, I used to really love pencil art, and it took me a long time to really just fall in love with ink, and I still love working in pencil. Like I'm kind of mimicking pencil on this comic, actually. Kind of pencil shading and stuff. And it's still in my blood. It's like something I love doing. But there is something that happened for me that really unlocked when I started using, especially for life drawings, when I started using ink. But pencil is a really incredible medium. It's always going to feel good because I think most of us kind of started working in pencil, and so it's like when you're drawing with a pencil, it just feels like home in a weird way. I think for a lot of us. And yes, Jim, you have achieved the earworm for sure. That was Jim Lujan, by the way, who did the "Let's Get Ready to Crumble," you know, uh, soundbite, and that made me really happy. Um, a lot, very happy. So I think that Ralph actually answered question 4 too. He said, "My favorite time to art is probably in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m." Yeah, I talked about that on the previous stream. I feel like, right now I'm trying to do like morning art, and it's like I don't feel as on fire as I do like super late at night, to my own detriment, because it's like my wife luckily is kind of keeping me on like a normal schedule. But I mentioned this on the last stream, but it's like if I had my way, I would be just, oh my gosh, I would be, honestly, there have been times in the past when I worked as a graphic designer and illustrator for like 15 years doing my own business and stuff. It's like I had the weirdest work hours of anyone I knew. Friends of mine would be like calling up to hang out, and I'd be like, I'm sleeping. And then I'd want to call friends, and it would be like they're sleeping because I was just on like a vampire schedule. And I kind of think a lot of creatives honestly have this like horrible addiction to like the witching hour. Like we like being up like at late at night. I think it's like the vampire in our soul or something. It's like our inner goth just comes out and we start expressing ourselves late at night. I don't know what it is, but it is interesting to me how like yeah, that's my natural inclination is to work like crazy hours. Um and luckily I have a very beautiful amazing wife who is keeping me on like a kind of normal schedule, which I actually really appreciate because I'm able to see people and all that fun stuff. Okay, we're gonna save. We've got like a good chunk of the flats here done. Just the Bosco poster, the floor. I want the floor to be kind of matching here. So we're gonna do this for the shadows. I want to keep reading through everybody's participation on these questions. And then we got another question coming up too. So we talked a little bit about what is a success? And that's a really, again, like, at least for me, it's always hard to say because it's always changing. I don't know if Jim has this too. I'd be curious to kind of hear. But for me, whatever I define as success tends to change because whenever I achieve anything that I think would be a success, suddenly there's something added to it that I need. So for me, I feel like it's a cycle that I'm never going to be It's like I used to describe it to friends because friends of mine always thought that was kind of weird, where they're like, why don't you feel successful after like something big happened? And I would kind of explain it like, for me, it's like there's like this ladder where I'm always it's very Sisyphean. It's like I'm climbing a ladder, and I know I need to get to this rung, and then if I can just get to this rung, and then I get to that rung, and I add 5 more rungs above it because it's just the way I am creatively. And I think that, what Thomas was saying about like the journey, as cliche and kind of woo woo as that can sound, I think that is true because I think it's about the journey. I don't think it's about um reaching the top. I feel like it's just about kind of like, in a weird way, it's almost like about the human endeavor of trying a challenge and seeing what I can do, and then when I do it, feeling like, okay, now I need to raise the bar and try another challenge. And a good example of that is like, for the longest time, I just thought, well, if I just complete a graphic novel, like an entire graphic novel, like then I'm a success. And the second I finished a graphic novel, I think I very quickly was like, well, I just need to finish another graphic novel. And now here I am on my third, and like, I think that's kind of where it goes. But thank you guys for answering these questions. It's a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and finish this spot behind Elizabeth. This is going to be fun because, like, a lot of the hard flat coloring was on the first panel, just getting all of that scene. So now all we need is like the Bosco thing, and then we can move on to. Then we have 3 panels completed, and all we have to do is flat like 3 more, which is kind of exciting. Frank said, Josh, you have 3 books under your belt, working on a 4th, a family that loves you, a home that art bought, a community that loves your streams and events. You, sir, are a success in my book. Thank you. It's only 2 books, though. I'm working on 3. Well, I guess 3 books, like, I guess Numb would be a book that was finished. But I'm working on 3rd graphic novel. But thank you, Frank. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like I'm never gonna feel that, even though it's like, and Frank said Numb is a book. Thank you. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I don't feel. I don't. I think Jim could answer this too because Jim's done like a million animations. He's won animation awards. He's done films that have been shown in like movie theaters at premieres. He's worked with like an Oscar nominated animator. He's been syndicated on TV. He's done like um you know uh character designs for like an actual animated TV series. And it's like, to me, Jim's a success. I wonder if Jim feels like a success. I guarantee probably not. And that's the weirdest thing about this whole journey we're on. I look at like Gary or Corey, and I view them as like such successes. I almost said concesses, and I don't know what a concess is, but successes. And yet I wonder if they see that in themselves. I tend to think that creatives are not satisfied. And I feel like satisfied creatives may not actually be creatives. Because I don't think we'll ever be satisfied. I think we're always pursuing. That's like the cat chasing the proverbial mouse. Corey said that's what I'm concerned about. I'm switching to morning soon. Yeah, it's a weird switch. Like even now, as I'm working, kind of in the zone, but I'm also like, I'm not, firing at like 110%. Whereas if this were like 2 a.m, I'd be like firing off, like getting stuff done. But the thing is, I wonder how much of that is illusion, because again, when I'm on those like wacky night schedules, like, I don't know if I get much more accomplished. I think it can just feel like I'm getting more accomplished because like I can just stay up till I finish. And so it can feel like, yeah, I got this done way faster, when it's really like, no, I just did most of the work, from like 1 to 6 in the morning as opposed to another time. By the way, I would love to hear what everybody's working on their own personal art right now. What projects are you working on? Doesn't have to be art stuff. I'm just kind of curious what you guys are up to. I sort of love the process of these streams, and like one of my favorite things about it, whether they're spicy or not, is this whole like process of being able to kind of hang out, and work on art like we're all in a bullpen or something. I think that's a lot of fun. Um, it's just like a blast. But I do want to get through everybody's comments as well. I will say, right now, as I'm going, like I'm going to do my best to get to everybody's comments. But obviously, if you leave a super chat, I will prioritize that over everyone else's comments. So if there's something you urgently need me to address on stream, feel free to send me a super chat. Um, right now, what we're doing is we're selecting the Bosco type. But I can also say, like, one of the tough things about art, this is just in regards to the success thing, the success question. Like, what is success? What do we view as successful? It can also be tough because let's say like I reach a level where I'm like, okay, I need to sell such many books to be a success. Well, what happens if I hit that and then I'm never able to hit that number again? Does that mean that I was like once successful and now I'm a failure? It's like a whole weird thing where even our own measures of success become like really weird and illusory, because it's like you can have that whole second, like a lot of bands have this issue where they get signed for like their first album and it's a hit, and these are songs that they've played live and worked on for like the entirety of their lives. And now they're in a scenario where they have to record a second. I think it's called the sophomore slump or something in music, where it's like they have to record the second follow-up album and it has to be all new material. And there's like a disappointment from people when the album doesn't match in quality, even though like one of them is like an album that they had to write, in a year, whereas the other is an album that they had like their entire like teenage years and like tons of touring to kind of vet these songs and perfect them. It's like a whole thing. So that's a tough one too, right? Because if you're a band and you're like, man, how am I a successful band? Well, and you're like, well, I need to sell like 1 million albums. And then let's say you sell 1 million albums and then every album after that sells like 1,000. Are you like now a failure? It's weird, it's just whenever you try to kind of pin down success, I think it gets real slippery. Um, and I will tell you, like, some of the most financially successful people I know are some of the least happy people I know. So it's like this weird, I don't think it can be finance. Like, it is definitely self-defined. I think you almost have to have the illusion that if you achieve success, there will be some sort of level of satisfaction in whatever pursuit you have. But I think it's very slippery, and I think it will change. And I envy anyone who doesn't have that, where they just can feel really good about whatever they're doing and be like, "Yeah, I did it." And it's like that's a cool feeling. I'm very jealous. We have finished the panel. Look at that. Boom. We got 2 panels done. I think I might add some lighting to these too. We'll see. We'll see if it works. But I do like the idea, since this is an exterior, I can kind of add like a subtle shade of like white over just in some areas to give it a little more depth. And I might do that, but for now, what I want to do before we even get into that is, and we can turn off that reference because I think we're all done with that. For now, what I want to do is just kind of get through color filling these other sections, and then we'll kind of see where we can go from there. Nice. Frank said Jim will be a guest on the Tarako Creative Cast in 2 weeks. We'll be trying a different format, just talking about what we want instead of just shilling. But shilling is allowed. Nice. Are you shilling for shillings? Thomas said, I worked graveyard for 16 years. The advantage is that you can get stuff done without interruption. Plays hell with your social life, though. Yeah, for sure. Corey said, we are not built to feel satisfied. I had to come to grips with that years ago. Yeah. Philip said, I'm actually working on a drawing that's a birthday gift for someone. That's awesome. Frank said, I don't know if Numb is a graphic novel, but it's a book you made, and you also have a story in Werewolves and Unicorns that could easily be a self-contained story on its own to add to your journey. Thanks. Ralph said, right now working a day job, graphic design. Actually, I've done, Frank, this is an interesting thing. If we're including short comics, I've been in a couple anthologies. There's one that recently came out. I can't remember the name of it, but it was by Lesser Known Comics that reprinted one that I got hired to do. There's, oh my gosh, what is it? Missed Connections, which was like edited by Julia Wirtz. I have a short comic in that. That was put out by Random House. I have a short comic in. Now I'm going to blank out on all of these things. There's like a music one called Side B, a music lovers anthology that I have a short comic in. And then I did a lot of short one-off comics for Devastator magazine back in the day as well. So if people are looking for like my one-off comics, you can find those. There's links to them on my website. And I think I have most of them available on my website. Let's see. Frank said, I'm editing a video, just need to record the intro. After that, I'll upload it to Roll for Tarako. Well, I'll be looking for it, buddy. Ralph said, when I got off, I'm not drawing as much, but I'm working on writing my comic project. Nice. Frank said, ride the wave. Thomas said, do you think a success and being successful are the same things? I think success is one of those things that's also defined by people around us. And that's why I get kind of disturbed when people only define it like monetarily. Because I have a lot of friends who, again, that I would consider really successful artists. And some of them are not making like a bunch of money off their art. They're just really good artists and they're continuing to make. So to me, that's a success, you know, when I look at their careers. But, you know, to them, maybe it feels like it's not. I look at Frank as a success in comics because Frank is consistently putting out mini comics and making the comics he wants, and he's consistent about it. He shows up, he does his work, he writes stories that he wants to write. He's successfully telling his stories, and I think Frank is very successful at that. That's how I view it. Chris Kawagua came in. How's it going, Chris? I would definitely consider Chris a success in art. He said those colors are looking good there. Thanks. Oh, colos are looking good here. Nice. I try hard on my colos. Yeah. Frank said, thanks, Chris. I just got a 10. Oh, you meant Josh's screen. And Frank said, I didn't know about your other short comics. I count them because I made a ton of them. Nice. I also made a zine a long time ago. A couple zines. Chris said, I'm going to buy a yacht. I don't know how to sail, but a yacht equals success. I think a yacht is a very dangerous thing to buy. I think people I know that are very wealthy, I know a person who bought a yacht and they ended up sinking most of their wealth into a boat. It's kind of a joke among like financial folks that if you want to be financially successful, avoid buying boats because buying a boat is like buying. You're basically gonna lose money every single day that you own it. You're gonna go into the negatives owning a yacht. So sorry to crush your dreams there, Chris. I know you were joking, but yeah, be careful out there, people who want to buy yachts or boats. Boats are a lot of fun, I'm sure, but holy moly. Let's see here. Nice. I like that. Frank said, nice. Yeah, Thomas said a yacht, a hole in the water in which you throw money. Exactly. And then Frank says, RC yacht or a yacht model for the shelf. I will say RC boats are pretty badass. It would be fun to get one of those. We have a park near us that would be really fun to drive a little RC boat through the water. I don't know if we legally can drive a boat through the water, but I don't see why not. I think there's like legal fishing in that area. So I don't see why you couldn't like put a little RC boat, you know, in that park area. Take it for a spin. Okay. We're going to I accidentally kind of moved on to a different panel, and I'm trying to just take things a panel at a time. Since we finished 2 panels, I'm going to go ahead and get a refill. We're going to play another trailer, and then we're going to finish panel 3, and we'll get on to the next creative question. I'm really excited to kind of get into it because these have been really interesting. Kind of hear all of your guys' takes on it too. So let's play the trailer. Let's play Jim Luhan's Wordzoid trailer. Here it is.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm going to go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon?
Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was going to get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
The downside of like starting to do exercise again pretty rigidly is I forgot that like when you're exercising, you have to like constantly be drinking water. It's like it's absurd. It's like I've drank so many glasses of water this morning that it's like insane, but it's like I keep drinking water. I'm very thirsty. I think it's like it brings up the like natural, inclination or whatever of a human being to like you're like you have to eat and you have to drink a lot of water. It's kind of weird. Anyhow, Chris said that the kind that costs money to maintain and makes a good Instagram backgrounds. What you should do, like most Instagram people, is just rent it and pretend you're rich. Although I guess renting a yacht does cost money. But I've heard like the majority of people doing these like lifestyle, cool lifestyle, rich lifestyle things are like kind of a lot of them are putting on a show from what I hear. I know it's shocking, guys. I know Chris knows this, by the way. But it is funny. A lot of those guys who are like, "Oh, I'm just in my garage with my Lambo and all these other cars." It's like a lot of those are like rentals they took out for the video, and very promptly returned the cars. I had even heard that like one of the more prominent guys is like the big wealth streamers actually like rented a mansion pretending it was like their mansion, and people bought into it, and then of course it kind of becomes a reality after a while. It's kind of one of those weird things of like I'm very wealthy, learn how to get wealthy and join my wealth program. And then people like fork out a bunch of money. And the people who do this actually end up becoming wealthy, but ironically, becoming wealthy telling other people how to become wealthy. It's like a weird pyramid scheme. I'm not saying that's not a good hustle. I mean, it's a little scammy, but hey, if it's making you a lot of money, good on you out there. Like, but it is so funny how much of that kind of, again, like, it's that weird thing where one of the darker sides of capitalism is like the worship um of wealth, which is not a bad pursuit in itself, but I think once you start worshiping wealth, you've lost the plot. That's what I think. That's my thoughts on it. That's my hot take, even though we're not getting into like stuff. Frank, I kind of get that. I also get Chris is saying, okay, this is where wealth would be cool. Chris was saying, I want a full size X Wing in my garage. I second that. When I was a kid and I got to go to Star Tours, I still very vividly remember I spent like an hour in the Star Tours store because they had a full X Wing replica in that store. I spent like an hour just in the store, in the gift shop, just like pretending in my head that I could climb into that thing. It was like the coolest thing ever. Um, yeah, it's probably a good thing that I don't have excessive wealth because if I had a lot of wealth, I probably would have like a bunch of guitars. I would probably have like a bunch of weird memorabilia. And I definitely understand Frank here, where he said, I want a full size Batmobile. I would love the Adam West. Like, there's what is it that, the Funko Pop store, I think, in like Seattle has like a recreated area that's like the Adam West Batman Batcave with like a full size Batmobile, like the sliding poles, everything. And I'm like, I would probably blow money on stupid things like that for sure. Were I wealthy. Like, I like to think that I'm above it, but it's like, dude, if I could be driving like a DeLorean right now, I don't know, man. It'd be pretty cool to be driving like a straight up, you know, Back to the Future era DeLorean with Mr. Fusion and everything. Wouldn't that be amazing? Anyhow, Frank actually was mentioning, he said, sign for my course on success in the art nation. It was 5,000, but I'm having a back to school sale, only 1,000. Nice. And then Chris said, few people strike it rich, but lure is built into our culture. Wealth influencers are the same as people who sold shovels, who made bank during the gold rush. 100%. Thomas was saying, you don't want to be wealthy, just a super nerd. I'm actually pretty happy with where I'm at financially. So my goal right now is like to try to retain that. Because again, I just left, my position as an art director. So there's going to be some lifestyle changes for sure. And hopefully not too big of a financial hit from that choice. But it was kind of the right call to make. So, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of see like what kind of adaptations and stuff I have to do. All right, let's do the next question. Let's do this Bosco type first. And I will open it up too for chat. Like if you guys have any art questions for the chat or for me, feel free to type them in. But I have another question coming up, and I'm not sure which number of questions, so I'll have to look back in the chats to kind of see. But we're going to do one more of these interesting art questions on our non-spicy live stream. Right after I finish deselecting this type. So we're just kind of getting one thing done at a time here. Like a turtle in a race, we're just going to take one step at a time, and this page will be colored. And it'll almost seem like magic, even though it's been hours and hours of work. All right. I was listening to somebody's stream recently where they were making, I think it might have been Marsh, where he was talking about kind of coming to a conclusion of slowing down a bit on his art. And actually that was a huge thing for me. I remember I think it was when I went to the Masters of American Comics show. And I was looking at all the artists that I wanted to be like their artwork in general. And I was like, oh, they just spend like a crap load more time on their pages than I do. Like, it's not just that they're better artists, but it's like they clearly spent like, at least 16 hours on this page. And then I remember, I was at this point, this is like before I had any published comics. And I was at this point where I like done a bunch of first pages and then abandoned them because they weren't coming out the way I wanted. And for me, it was like this big wake up call of like, oh, I need to actually like slow down and like make good pages, Because what's weird is quite often if you do something rushed, it just kind of looks rushed. And like, it's not bad to have quick styles in art and stuff like that. But I remember just realizing like, oh, that's like the magic trick. That's like the thing that the guys I really dig, and this isn't everyone, but the guys I really dig, like a big differentiation at the time between me and them wasn't like speed. Like they weren't much faster. Although honestly, I do know a lot of artists that are like a million times faster. But it wasn't really speed. It was more just like they actually just dedicated themselves to a page and to make the best page they could. And then they move on to the next page. And like they spent, but I used to tell this to students where it's like, Chris Ware spends, I think from what I've read, he spends like a week on one page. If Chris Ware is spending a week on a page and you're spending an hour on a page, and you're like looking at his pages and you're like, why aren't my pages as good? Like one indicator might be like, I don't know. I mean, Chris Ware spends a week on a page. Did you spend a week on your page? Like, you know what I mean? Not saying you should, but it's like if you're expecting results, but like if you look at the guys you admire and you're spending less time to create art than they are, and then you're frustrated with the results because it's not coming out as good, like that seems like a really good indicator, like maybe you need to slow down. And I remember, I think Marsh was talking about this and I got excited hearing it. And I like Marsh's art a lot, but it just felt like, oh cool, he's probably going to unlock something. Because for me, and it's only just speaking from my own experience, but for me that unlocked almost everything, where I was like, oh, I just got to actually slow down and make these the best I can, and then the speed will come afterwards, And it doesn't always happen like the way I want it to. Like for instance, flatting this page, is taking forever, but it's like like at the end of the day, hopefully I'll end up with pages that I'm proud of, and maybe they don't come out as good as the guys I admire, but I'm spending as much time as they are. If not more. And I think that's the way it should be. You should be probably putting more time into single pieces than everyone you admire does. If you want to get closer to the guys you really dig, I think looking at the guys you admire and like maybe look at how long they spend on a page. And again, some guys are super quick, but it's like, I feel like if you're spending less time than the guys you admire or that you want to be like, then that's a good indicator. Like maybe you need to slow down a bit, and again, like you'll get faster as you go, but it's like you can't expect results, of like if you look at a painter who spent like a month on a single painting, which a lot of like guys who do gallery shows do. And then you're just knocking out a painting in like 4 hours and you're like, why didn't this come out like this guy's painting? Well, it's like, well, he spent a month on it. That might be why, time isn't the total trick, right? Talent is a big part of it. You know, we've had David Hartman on Artcasters, and the guy makes like a finished, beautiful comic page in like, you know, in the span of that episode. From like, he did an episode where he actually did a comic page on stream, and it was within 1 hour from like rough to final to fully flat colored. He finished a beautiful page in like 1 hour, you know? I'm not that fast, but it would be insane if I was trying to be like David Hartman and I'm spending less than that, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. That always, you know, that to me was a big magic trick, was like unlocking like how long the guys I admire were spending on pages. And then I was like, oh, okay. That's what I got to do. You know, for me, that was a big turnaround. Chris said, lifestyle changes, more like caviar breakfasts. That's right. Frank said, to accomplish my goal for today, I need to suck out. Sneak out, I think, not suck out, so I can do some recording. Got it. All right, well, see you, Frank. Appreciate it. Thomas says, spice at night with the Kemble. I like it. And then Frank said, no more champagne by the pool. It's wine coolers at the lake house. Exactly. I might have to stop eating filet mignon every day for my daily regimen of filet mignon. I don't know if I told you guys this. I have a buddy who's pretty wealthy, and it didn't even dawn on me like kind of the difference between our scenarios. Till one day he called me to like talk about a comic that we had grown up reading in like junior high, and he's like, I was just thinking about you because I bumped into I think the comic was called Mr. Punch. He's like, yeah, I came across Mr. Punch. I haven't looked at that in years, since like junior high. It made me think of you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, yeah, my au pair was like, our au pair was cleaning the kids' room, and you know, and it was like just this moment of like, oh, that's weird. Like, I just didn't even think. I mean, to me, that's like extravagantly wealthy. If you have like a literal au pair who's like a live-in nanny, you know, at your house for your kids, not criticizing it. It's just, it's a foreign world to me. I was like, oh yeah, people do that. they have au pairs. And what's funny is like to like super wealthy people, it'd be like only one au pair, you know. But to me, that just seemed like really extravagant. And it was funny because they just said it so casually. I was like, oh wow, they've been living in that scenario for so long, you know, that it's just like this average thing. It's like, you know, how your like au pair is like, you know, when your au pair is like cleaning and doesn't really like vacuum in a specific area, and you're like, oh man, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I'm like, I don't know at all. But it was one of those funny moments of like, wow, we are really in different realities, you know. More power to them, you know. I mean, I think most parents would like appreciate, you know, having a little bit of assistance, you know, around the house or whatever. But yeah, that was one of those funny moments where it's like, wow, it's different realities, you know. Okay, we got a question coming up, a creative question, ladies and gents. Coming up for the chat, so get ready for the next creative question. This is actually a really good one. Let me see where we're at for numbers of questions too. We're going back in time. I'm gonna go back in time. We're gonna do. Okay, so 7 was the success question. So here's the next question, guys. Does art help you in other areas of your life? That is the question. It's not to be or not to be. It's, does art help you in other areas of your life? That's a good question. I want to know what you guys think. For me, I think that art definitely helps in a weird way. I think it can be really dangerous and I think it can hurt too. But I think in general, the practice of trying to do something really hard and overcoming challenges and accomplishing the thing, whatever that thing may be, I think is really healthy. And I think it gives me confidence that when I come across things that are obstacles, that I can overcome them. And the more I do it, the more it builds confidence in new situations because I've overcome new situations and accomplished the goal before. So I think in that sense, art helps. I think it also helps me process. I've always done that my whole life. I think that art is a very great outlet to kind of talk about heavy topics that you otherwise maybe would be afraid to explore. I think Two Stories is a really good example of that, where it's like there is like a confessional element to art that I think is really cool and cathartic. And I think that art makes me view the world in a way that I think like non-artists might not view the world as. Not as a knock to like people who don't do art, but I think the act of doing art makes you look at things differently. It makes you look at color differently. Jim actually was talking about this on the stream on his "Hey Man, how's your movie going?" last night with Gary, where he was talking about how he likes to write side characters. And it was a really interesting conversation. But he was kind of pointing out like this, like he was saying, I think his take on it was, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but he was basically saying if you go to like a laundromat and you see somebody like working on fixing clothes, a lot of people would just walk past that. But him as a writer, he starts like asking interesting questions about it. He's like, I wonder if, this person like maybe had like a bad time at prom. And so like, because of that, they like sew secret messages into like, prom dresses, like whenever they're working. And then maybe someday somebody comes across like a secret message that they sewed on the dress or something like that. And I think that's one thing that I think creativity and art unlocks for me too is there's always a story in things. And I always find stories in weird places. And I can really appreciate story a little more, I think, than if I were not practicing trying to make stories, Okay, I think we have color filled these Bosco posters. So now it's just about deselecting these Bosco posters. So now I'm kind of curious what you guys think, but obviously art also affects my life financially. It's been like a very fun career and I hope to continue it. It's to me like one of the best ways to make money because to me it just is one of the few trades where things kind of make sense to me. Visual communication just is such a fun process and it's something that it's a way my mind has been trained to work. And so for me, that's a big deal. Getting closer to the 2-hour mark, I'm hoping that we can finish this panel. Yeah, Chris said art can help with abstract solution seeking. Also, intrinsic empathy builder if you work on story. I really actually like that. Yeah, the act of kind of having to kind of think outside of the box to come up with a solution that's a visual communication can help you when you're facing things that are out of the ordinary and you need to think of extraordinary solutions to problems, you know? It definitely helps you problem solve, I think, in ways that can be kind of outside of the box and I think would be harder for maybe a non-creative to do. And I think we're all creative. So when I say non-creative, I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean someone who's not practicing creativity on a daily basis might have more trouble thinking of a unconventional solution to an issue. So what we're gonna do here is I want to have this as like almost like a light source. I want to also do this as like the light source side. And then I want to do a darker shade of this gray. I'll pull it from a previous panel for the other side of this column, if we can find it. That should be good. Might be too dark, we'll see. Is that too dark? Can I go one notch lighter? Still have a differentiation. Did I blink out from the screen? Can you guys still hear me? Because the screen went black for me. Okay, I think we're good on that. We're definitely having some connection issues today, occasionally. I think Spectrum, I think it's Spectrum. All right. We're going to do some interesting sort of abstract, just gray fields here. Oh, somehow I had deselected. Let's do... I kind of want to do the windows here. Oh, come on. I'm getting the pinwheel a lot. Okay, here we go. I'm going to kind of have these... do I want these as windows? I think I want the windows to be here. Kind of like this spot. And I think this will make sense in a second. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear everybody's answers to these interesting kind of questions about creatives. It's always fun to hear your guys' take on it as well. I think here we're going to do... that, but I want a lighter version of it. So I'm going to grab this. And we'll kind of see what we can do here. And I'm going to go ahead and have this part here, kind of deselected, and then we're going to do our other part. So we're mainly trying to kind of create depth with like fully flat color. And then we might end up adding a little bit of light rendering over the top. Again, I kind of want to get all the flats in first to kind of figure that out first. And then we'll kind of see where it goes from there. So now we're going to kind of fill in this this fence. And we'll probably be playing another trailer very soon. And possibly addressing another question. But I think like art really does, I think the practice of making art definitely affects life outside of just art. I think we become kind of weird. I think artists just look at the world a little differently. Ian Mackay had a really interesting quote. I've talked about this one before, where he said that skateboarding kind of had like a massive impact on his life because he would suddenly look at like a landscape in a city that like most people would just walk past, like a curb, that has a function and it's like already built for that function. And most people just look at it and go, oh, okay, that's a functional thing. It does this thing. He was saying that like skateboarding taught him to like actually look at cities for the potential of them because you could redefine the use of something. I actually really dig that. Strangely enough, I think that works. So we are done with panel 3. And now I need to just make this magenta and we'll play another trailer. But I think that art kind of has a similar effect where it makes you kind of look at the utility of things a little differently. You can see potential in things that maybe we only saw some specific potential in before, That's a little beyond just the basic utilitarian view of it. I also realize I've been hunched forward like this as I've been working. I got to watch for that. Thomas said, I'm a doodler at best, not an artist, but when I worked at Levi's checking the color of jeans, never knew blue jeans had so many colors in them. That really changed how I looked at things. Yeah, Chris was saying if you specialize in one thing to a high degree, you start to notice skippable details, for sure. All right, guys. We're going to play the trailer for... Let's see which one we're going to do. I think this will be good. We'll play the trailer for... Let's play Christopher Runciman's trailer. I think it's for Jacob's Apartment, and we'll be back.
Hi, my name's Chris, and I like comics. I want to talk about this comic for a second here. I just got this in. I ordered it direct from my local comic shop through Diamond Distributing. It's Joshua Kemble's Jacob's Apartment. I really enjoyed this book. There's all kinds of comics out there, let's be honest. There's fun comics, there's superhero comics, there's young adult comics, there's adventure comics for kids. There's so many different things under the planet. But there's also an entire subgenre of alternative books. Real life, real world depictions in comic book form. Situations that happen to each and every one of us. And this is a fine example of that. If you get a chance, order this book from your local comic shop. You won't be disappointed. I can't sing its praises high enough. Okay? Check it out. Check Is a Pogren by Joshua Kemble.
A lot of coffee and water. And we're going to finish this page. 2 panels left. Excuse me. Let's get into our last question. This may not be the last, but this is a new one. How do you develop your art skills? I think that's a good question too. I feel like for me, and I'm going to answer this, but I encourage you guys, if you're listening, type your answers in chat. For me, my art skills have always been, I think this is partially autistic of me, but I've always been very project based with my learning in general. If there's something I want to do, I will find the motivation to kind of learn how to do it. And if I need to get better to do it, I will get better. And so I feel like, to me, I advance a lot in art by taking on projects that I really want to do. And through the execution of those projects, I learn so much that I just inevitably get a little bit better at whatever it is I wanted to do. A good example of that is like this comic I'm doing in a totally different style. I guess you could consider it a different style, even though it still looks like my art, I think, but it's like a different technique that I haven't used as much, or if I did, it's like relying on techniques that maybe I did more often in art school. And I'm literally just doing that because that's the technique that I think would make this book look cool. Like it's not like I need to do this in my style. It's like this would look really cool if it was done kind of like almost like it was done with a black Prismacolor and then some rendering, and then it just has tones of color underneath. I think that would match the vibe of the story. And inevitably, in doing that, I kind of play with it and I start learning more about like what I can do with those limitations for like a new project. To me, that's always been how I learn, like, is project-based learning. I never have been good at like rote learning where I just learn something for no reason. So for me, like part of improving my art skill is just curiosity, and then again, projects, I will say there are some activities that can really improve your art that I wish I could do more of. I find that, like drawing constantly in your sketchbook is really helpful. I have not maintained a really solid sketchbook for years, but it's partially because the time that I'm spending drawing is mostly on projects that are due or that I have to do, or book deals that have gotten and stuff like that. And I'm kind of fortunate in that sense, but I think the constant working and constantly drawing will inevitably lead to improvement in your art skills. So I think that's a good way to develop your art skills. In my opinion, I know from teaching, I think that was the most effective way to get kids to level up in art, was give them a project, give them an objective or a goal, and preferably something they're interested in, right? Because if somebody's not interested in something, they're rarely going to have incentive or reason to get better at it. So you have to kind of give them a reason or an incentive to be interested in it, and then kind of encourage them to explore and kind of pursue those interests. And I think stubbornness has helped me a lot. There's a stubbornness that can be a real problem in art, which is like just to, let's say you can't do good anatomy or something and you just keep repeating the same bad anatomy over and over and over and over again, that can be like really detrimental to your growth as an artist. But I think there is a certain stubbornness to it where it's like, when I was a kid, and I think a lot of us have this. When I was a kid, I wanted to draw eyes. A lot of kids I knew wanted to be able to draw people's eyes. But a lot of kids I knew like wanted to do it and then they would get frustrated when they couldn't and they'd just kind of stop and like throw the paper and be like, I can't draw. Whereas I would go home and I would pull out a sheet of paper and I'd just draw eyes over and over and over and over again until I started being happy with the results, and a lot of that was like through observation and just repetition and stubbornness, like just and maybe a little bit of delusion, like the belief that I can do it. There's a lot of people who, I'm on page 78 of this graphic novel. I know a lot of young cartoonists that if they were on, page 20 of something, they would abandon it because it starts getting really hard, it also there's definitely times where it's not fun and you don't feel inspired. There's like a weird small group of people who can get 78 pages into anything. And there's also a bigger group of people that like can get thousands of pages in. I think compared to somebody like Craig Thompson, my commitment to pages is pretty weak. If you look at like Habibi, it's like that's like I think that's a couple thousand pages. So like, but you have to have a little bit of delusion when you're taking on a project, that like is like I could do a 200-page graphic novel. Like I can do that. And in reality, that this will be the longest comic I've ever made. But I have this like weird delusion where I'm like, I can do it, You have to have this like almost belief that it's possible. Even though it feels impossible, like most of the time you're doing it. And I think that helps, strangely enough, level up your art, Stubbornness, so you're not going to get you have a stick-to-itiveness to it. And then curiosity, so it's something you're interested in. And then like delusional belief that it is possible, that it is not outside of your reach to accomplish whatever you're setting out to do. I feel like those are really important things. And then there's this weird part where it's like with all of that, you also need to be able to be a little bit objective and notice areas where you need to grow. So as you're like for me, as I'm working on comics, it's like I kind of take note, like, oh, this is something I'm kind of weak at. Maybe I could work on that. For me, typography was a big one where I didn't really get decent at type until I started really forcing myself to learn type and to really fall in love with type. And a lot of that was just by facing the dragon and just kind of doing the type over and over again until I got so competent at type that I feel more comfortable with typography than a lot of things now. Actually, I'm more comfortable with type than some elements of composition. But I used to be so uncomfortable with type. Like when I did Numb, I had my friend Josh Patterson do the lettering because he was a graphic designer. And at the time I was like, well, I'm an illustrator. I can't do type. And but then like, I learned. Yeah, Thomas was saying tenacity would be a better word. That's a really perfect word, actually. That's a way less wordy word. But I tend to think that for people like me, if you don't have a project, it's like the purpose of just getting better for the sake of getting better just gets kind of boring. Like, I want to get better and have something to show for it. Like, I'm kind of weird like that. I feel so much better if I have a book out of it when I'm better. I've been that way forever. I got good at t-shirt design by like doing t-shirt designs and then getting t-shirts printed, But I don't think I don't know if I would have really improved on those if I didn't have the goal of having an end product. I don't know if that makes sense. I can say again, like sketchbook drawing is ideal. Like if you're starting out and you're like a young artist and you want to level up, drawing in your sketchbook all the time. Even there, like having goals, like don't just fart around in your sketchbook. Don't just draw whatever you want. Like go like to a mall and be like, I'm gonna draw, 20 people, and I'm gonna force myself to draw, maybe some things I'm not comfortable drawing. Like maybe I'll draw the building instead of just the people. Chris said having a series or project really helped me try to define a personal style and goal. Yeah. And I know like people are different, people have different learning styles and stuff. But for me, and I noticed this teaching too, I think for a lot of artists, the real wealth of knowledge comes when you have a goal and you have like a goal you're interested in, and you have a project and you have like a completion, like a way to measure. What's up? Oh, they're watching Karate Sheep, which is a show on Netflix that Ben's really into. It's about a sheep that does karate against wolves. That's called Karate Sheep, right, Mai? Yeah. It's very funny. It kind of reminds me of like old Looney Tunes. Because it has like a very like Wile E. Coyote kind of vibe to it, where it's like this wolf is always trying to eat the sheep, and then the sheep always kind of outsmart the wolf. Kind of classic animation premise there. The nice thing about these flats is they're going to go a lot quicker because we got the hardest flat colors done yesterday. And so I think we might be able to actually achieve the goal that I set out to do by the end of it. But I'm curious, how do you guys kind of level up? Like, what allows you to level up in art? I didn't get good at backgrounds, like drawing backgrounds. I used to really suck at that until I saw comics that I really dug, and I was looking at my art and I was looking at their comics, and I was like, why is it that theirs so cool and mine is not? And I realized I was cheating all of my backgrounds and they were not. And I was like, okay, well, I got to learn backgrounds because like that makes a big difference. It really sits you in an area. So I just forced myself to draw backgrounds. But again, it was like a project based thing where it's like, okay, I objectively like looked at something they had that I didn't, and then I was like, okay, well, I need to have that to get the result I want. So I'm going to just kind of buckle down. Even though I don't know how now, I'll figure it out and we'll get those backgrounds done, And I always think that's actually a big thing. Like a lot of comic artists, man, have no idea like how much it will level up your art if you just add backgrounds. Like weirdly enough, a lot of people, who are kind of like me, like really like drawing people and don't like drawing backgrounds. I'm totally that way where it's like if I had my way, I'd just draw faces all day. I love drawing faces. I'm so familiar with faces. But the act of just like sitting down and like forcing myself to draw backgrounds was like a huge game changer for like the quality of my comics. And also, it made me realize like it's possible because it's like, okay, you buckle down, you try it, and then you're like, oh, I guess I can draw backgrounds. And again, it's like that trick I was talking about that like Marsh was talking about, where it's like there is this like magic trick to just being like, oh, okay, it just takes time. Like that's it. It's just time. It's just time. And then you spend time on your backgrounds, and you're like, oh, these actually kind of work better. You know, it's like a weird thing. But yeah, there has to be delusion to it because I've never worked on a historical fiction graphic novel before. You know, I I have no reason to think I could effectively do a historical fiction graphic novel, but here I am doing it. And a lot of that's just because I had this weird idea, like, hey, I could do that, you know. And what's cool is once I've done it, then guess what? I'm like a guy who's done like historical fiction graphic novels. Like I get to join that special club and realize like there was nothing special to it. It was just work, you know? Like a lot of things. Okay, I want to kind of do a little bit here, but I also think I want to have this sort of cut into here and here. Then I think I want to have this be like that darker color. There we go. And then I think I want to have these match the ones over here. And we're almost done with the flats for this page, which I'm very excited about. I'm thrilled, ladies and gents. I'm thrilled. Oh yeah, Chris was saying that was fun when we went to the mall to do sketchbook sketches in college. Yeah, for sure it was. Chris was saying I got better at graphic design by being around really talented designers. That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing, is also who you surround yourself with. So, like one thing that you'll notice, even with comics and time, right? Where it's like, I think by hanging out with other cartoonists, I got more comfortable spending more time on my panels because I realized these guys are spending a lot of time on their panels. Like, I'd hang out with other cartoonists and I'd be like, oh, okay, they don't do it that fast. Like, it is a lot of work. Very similar with graphic designers, where you start hanging out with graphic designers and you're like, well, I mean, part of why their type looks so good is they don't just like type a font real fast, you know? There's like an elegance to it. Or you see them like lay out a grid and you're like, oh, aha. You're like learning some tricks, you know? And that goes a really long way. So yeah, who you surround yourself with is a huge one for like leveling up for sure. Cause like it's hard if you like hang out with really talented designers to not have like a little bit of design like rub off on you. And I gotta give credit to the school that like Chris Caligu and I went to. I think that's a huge help too, because at Cal State Long Beach, even if you were an illustration major, they forced us to take a lot of design classes. And so there was a lot of like unity and cohesion between the design department and the illustration department. You know, you had to take like typography and like some other basic design stuff. And at the time, I just thought it was horrible, you know, because I was like, I came here to draw. I didn't want to do this, you know. But I am so thankful for that now because, like, this day and age, it's so important for people to be able to kind of work hybrid, you know, and be able to kind of do a lot of things. And I'm just like, I think that was really cool that Cal State Long Beach was really focused on that more kind of holistic approach. See if this works. Kind of digging that. I want to add for no reason, I just want a little more variation here. So I think I'm going to want to kind of add like a line there, just so we're kind of creating a little more repetition of color. And then I want to go up here and create just a little bit more depth with like variety of gray here. And I think that will do it and get us there, where I can do this and hit save, and we can look at it. And I feel like that's working pretty well. So now we just have one panel left to go, ladies and gents. And we might go through more questions, because again, this is a non-spicy stream, okay? We're trying to have a healthy stream today, and then maybe we'll bring the spice tomorrow. Let me see here. Okay, guys, we have finished the flats for all but one last panel. It's almost 1. I'm going to finish this last panel before I leave for lunch. I'm going to go ahead and play another trailer. This one will be Philip Chandler's trailer, and I'll be right back. And we're going to blast through the last part of this comic page and the flats. Here we
Hi,
go.
my name is Phil Chandler. I'm a freelance artist, illustrator, and cartoonist. Today, though, however, I want to tell you about a graphic novel I picked up recently called Jacob's Apartment. This book was both written and beautifully illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It is the story of a doomed romance that causes the main character to question his beliefs and his faith, while he's also going through other tragedies in his life. Every page has been illustrated by hand and digitally colored with painstaking detail. It is an emotional story that causes you to think and even question things in your own life. And while the story is a tragedy, it is one that I was completely entertained by and I highly recommend. You can currently find this on Amazon, or even check in with your local bookstore and see if you can order it. And while you're at it, you can also check out my Instagram at Phil Chandler Arts, and also my YouTube channel by the same name, Phil Chandler Arts. And go buy Jacob's Apartment.
Listen to Philip. Go buy Jacob's Apartment. If you haven't yet, you guys, we're about 2 hours and 20 minutes into the stream. Make sure you hit like. Make sure you hit the bell so that you get notifications when we're about to go live, and that you're subscribed to this channel. It'd be really appreciated. And honestly, that like goes a really long way. It's helped us get a bigger community, more involvement on the live streams, and I plan on doing more and more of these. So, if you're enjoying this in the slightest, if it's keeping you company while you're doing your art, I just encourage you to hit that like button. So we have one last panel on this page, and then I might mess with just some very subtle light, because right now we have shadow. I think because it's outdoors, we might be able to get away with a little bit of a light source. We'll see if it's overkill. But before we get to that, I want to go ahead and color the last panel here. And I think we're going to go ahead and we'll kind of get into this. Let's see here. Okay, you know what? Let's just get into this and finish up this panel. I do think there's a lot to be said for surrounding yourself with other creatives, though, because I find personally I get a ton of inspiration from my buddies, from artists that I admire, and I think like that is kind of an important part. Like I feel like there is something to be said for kind of getting in a little tunnel and like working, especially if you're cartooning. Like I said, a lot of the trick when you start hanging out with other cartoonists is just spending the time and actually finishing things. And you'd be surprised when you start meeting cartoonists, like how much time they actually put into these things that we just scroll past on like Instagram or whatever, And so like that is a big magic trick, is just the time and just buckling down and doing the work. But it is really important, I think, to surround yourself or seek out people that you're inspired by. And if you can, like, work near them or with them or around them. Like, I think part of why we do art casters and have continued to do it, it's not like Corey, Scott, and I make like a ton of money on art casters. It's just fun to like hang out and have a venue to kind of be creative with other creatives, and a reason to kind of hang out and talk every week. And I get a lot of inspiration from those guys because they're constantly working, they're constantly making stuff, and there is something to be said for, it kind of rubs off on you. Like if you're around people who are like putting things out and finishing, then you might start being an artist that finishes things. If you're surrounded by artists that like half start projects and abandon them all the time, then don't be surprised if you start being an artist that like kind of half starts projects and abandons them, because that's like who you surrounded yourself with. Um so it's like kind of being around people who are productive is definitely helpful, and also like you can glean a lot from watching somebody draw or watching somebody work. Um, and I think most artists, are pretty willing to share. Like, I think we like, mentoring and sharing, because I think most of us really relied on that when we were early in our careers. And so, of course, we're going to like value it. Um, yeah, I think who you surround yourself with has a real impact on your work, for sure. And again, I want to kind of credit the school I went to for that too, because I do think like Chris will vouch for this, but it's like we had a really good class in college of just like incredibly talented people. And we were kind of lucky in that sense because, you know, um, I think everybody in our group kind of inspired each other to level up and shared information, and, you know, it just kinda helps, like, create, like, a level up effect that I think went kinda cascaded with a lot of the people who graduated in our class. Right now, I'm starting to feel a little bit hungry, but I have this, like, stubbornness, like I was saying, or tenacity that I think Thomas called it, but it's like, I'm gonna finish this page first, and then I'll eat. I will eat after I finish this page. This page should not be hard to finish. It's it's relatively close. We're through all the hardest work. This at this point is really simple flats. So they shouldn't take quite as long as the other ones. I think I'll have this. There's like a potted plant here too. Kind of address that in a second. I believe the carpets. I'll take a look. Carpets here should be, yeah, they're red. Okay, cool. So it's like a really solid red carpet, which I think we can pull from our little demon guy up here. I kind of want to have this. I need to kind of see what this looks like with shading, because it looks like I might have missed a line there, a closing line. Okay, so we did kind of miss a line, which is okay. We can throw that in there. So my rich black is 50, 50, 50, 100. So I'm typing that in CMYK, and then we're Some people like to work in CMYK. Some people prefer to work in RGB and then kind of transfer it over. I'm old school. I like working in CMYK for print. The comic's being made for print and it's going to be printed in CMYK. I want to work in CMYK. There's split schools on that, and I think it can kind of go either way. Did I just draw the line on the wrong layer? I did. I want to draw that on my line art layer. Okay, and I want to lock my line art again, and then go back to my flat color layer. And now we're going to kind of make the red kind of fade back. But I want to make sure there's saturation to my red as I fade it back. And then we'll go back down to kind of a more like neutral. And I think actually this would be like a white wall, but I want it to kind of really push into the background. So I think I'll do that kind of greenish blue. And again, I notice an area where I missed lines. So I'm going to add another line. And that'll be right about here. So that I can have that kind of blue. So I didn't want that on my border layer. I wanted that on my line layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and lock that again. And then we'll go to our flats and deselect that area. So you guys might notice that like as I'm making selections when I'm coloring, I kind of work like reductively and then adductively. Like sometimes I'm like adding shapes, but in general, I find like with art like this, it's much quicker for me. And again, this is going to differ for each person, but I find it to be much quicker for me to go through and kind of deselect colors as I add them rather than to add selections. But I can always go back and add them if I need to add selections. And also when I'm using the marquee tool, you'll notice that I have anti-alias off because that's going to make the colors print crisp. Like you're not going to see like a blurry edge to the color. Now my lines here are definitely anti-aliased because they're kind of simulating pencils, so they're going to be a little blurrier on the edges, but that's by design. Because I want it to have like kind of like an old school pencil look. Okay, so we're going to deselect this area here. We're getting really close to done with this page, which I'm really excited about. I think these conversations about how you define success or what kind of motivates you as an artist, I think some of these questions are really good to think about. Because let's put it this way, if you define success in a certain way and you're finding yourself not meeting that, like you can sit down and start back planning based on what your own definition of success would be. You can go, "Oh, well, I'm not meeting it here, but I can like get there by doing such steps," right? It's like a nice kind of meeting point for goal setting, you know? And I think as cheesy as it is, you know, I think setting goals is like half the trick as well. It's why I have like a list of things that I have to do and stuff because to me having a list like really helps me target my resources. And your resources are like your time and your efforts and you know, sometimes it's going to be your money. It's like, where are you going to target these things to kind of get closer to your goals? And in order to do that, you kind of have to know what are my goals? Like, what do I view as a success in art? Like, what motivates me to do art? What do I think the purpose of art is? It's funny because these all sound like weird theoretical questions, but I think the more deeply you think about them, the more they can guide you in choices in life in very meaningful ways. Um, and answer really hard questions, like in a weird way where I was art directing. It's like I definitely came to the conclusion this is not a place that I need to be right now. And a lot of it had to do with those kind of deeper questions. Um, and that's a hard decision to make if you haven't really thought through those sorts of questions for yourself. And they're always going to be different, right? Everybody, that is one of those things where it's going to be very subjective. It's not easily objectively measurable, you know? Okay, so we have this done. And now what we need to do is a little bit more differentiation of shadow here. I think I want it to have a little bit more of a differentiation than that. Kind of working with a lot of the tones that are already established on other panels to kind of give it unity. And we're going to go ahead and color this plant and then the floor. And then I think we'll be done with our stream, which I'm really excited about. Hopefully, as I've been doing this, it's kept you guys company while you're working on something. I know San Diego Comic-Con's around the corner. It might even be happening now. I think, Chris, you were doing a panel. Chris Caligua, I think, was doing a panel at Comic-Con. Did that already happen, Chris? Am I crazy? I know you and Ralph were going to do a panel on storyboarding at San Diego Comic-Con, which, by the way, speaking of success, that is a huge accomplishment to be able to do a panel at the biggest convention in the world. That's one you can, put on the list of, hey, I did that, It might have already happened now that I think about it. Or is it happening in the future? I don't know. Chris will let us know. Jim said, I was told that if I turn into the Kemble stream, I have a chance at winning 1 billion. Please confirm. 1 billion smiles. Yes. 1 billion smiles. 100%. I think out of the 298 streams I've done, I think eventually we're going to get to 1 billion smiles. That almost sounds like a Jim Lujan cartoon in general. But I feel like, Jim, don't you have a cartoon that has smiles in the title? I think you do. I think it's the 7 Smiles or something. By the way, you guys should check out Jim Lujan, his Hey Man, How's Your Movie Going? He did one yesterday where he had Gary Hodges on. And Gary is, used to be a professional journalist. And so when you hear, when Gary is guesting on a stream to ask questions, it's like you suddenly see how it's supposed to be done. Where you're like, wow, these are great questions. It's really cool. It was really insightful. It was fun to see. And also Gary does not mess around. He asks really great, really deep questions. Like a boss. I think that's going to do it. I think that's going to do it for our flats. So now what I want to do is mess with... Oh, nice. Okay. Chris said, I'm only interested if I have a chance to win 1 billion in paper towels. Nice. Chris also said Friday, Friday, Friday. So if you guys are going to San Diego Comic-Con, you want to see a master at storyboarding. Actually, two masters. I know Ralph is going to be there too. Ralph Miranda, amazing artist. Both I went to school with. Ralph Miranda and Chris Cawagua are doing a panel at 6:30. Is that, I'd imagine that's 6:30 p.m. That'd be insane to do a panel at 6:30 a.m. at 29 CD. So if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, you should go check them out. Tell them I sent you. Check out Chris Cawagua's work. He's amazing, and I think it'll be really informative for people who might want to get into storyboarding work. But not only that, it should be really entertaining, and they're really good people. I've worked with both of them. I've worked on projects with them. They're very talented people. Chris said, I edited a silly promo using Ralph's cartoon character. I saw it. I liked it. By the way, Ralph, his Bubba cartoon with the AI was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. So there's that too. Okay, I'm gonna mess with just some very subtle lighting. I want to indicate that there's light kind of coming from the top right, I'm thinking, and we'll see if this is just overkill. It might be, it might not be. I just want to do this and see if it works. To kind of make these lights kind of look like they're glowing a little more too. I think it would be fun. And again, I kind of have to use this almost like I'm using a white pencil, but I think it might add just a little touch of awesomeness to it. Nothing like too detailed. Nothing too fancy. Just a little bit of a punch to kind of help give it a little bit of depth. But I also want to keep it raw a little bit so that it's not like ruining the effect too much. Just subtle little indications of lighting. Kind of added to the page. Part of the limitation I placed on myself for this book is the lighting kind of has to be painted in, and preferably color holds can be used in the sky, and that's kind of it. So I'm trying to avoid, unless there's fire or light, I'm trying to avoid color holds. And I might overkill it. It might be too much. We'll see. I'll ask your guys' opinion once we get there. But I kind of think just adding like a little bit might kind of be nice. Kind of see if that works. So does that pop a little more? I think I kind of like that. I think we're going to do that. Let's see. Again, I can pull back from it because I'm doing it on its own layer. And then I'm really excited after this because I'm going to eat lunch, which is going to be really fun. And it'll feel like a reward. So this is actually a good answer to that earlier thing about leveling up too. Setting like weird little goals and micro goals, I think, is a really good way to level up. I think for people who have trouble finishing, especially with art, I think setting little micro goals will help you get projects done. So, like a good example would be like little systems of self reward, like when you sit down to work, being like, okay, I have to finish this before I eat. I have to finish this before I get to play video games. I have to finish this before whatever. Even if it's an important thing, where you're like, man, I got to vacuum. I have to finish this before I can vacuum. Whatever it is, just have that little micro target. I think that helps level up a lot. Actually kind of digging this. I feel like I might be overdoing it with the white a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see once we kind of fill it in. Let's see if this works, you know? That's a little too much. I just need like a very light highlight there. And we'll do just a little bit on Elizabeth, but not much. We don't want to blow it out. Just enough to where it's like an indication, you know? And I want to keep it a little rough because I want it to look very hand done. So let's see, does that help? Or am I blowing it out here? Kind of like that, but I feel like it's a little too much on her hair. So I'm going to like pull it back a little bit. Went a little too buck wild here. I think, and it's a little too much on her back. I want it to be just a little bit there, not as much. There we go. We're getting there. Yeah, that was a funny promo you did, Chris. I really enjoyed it. So I kind of like the light source. I think we just need very subtle indications of it here. Like super subtle. I'm going to just go ahead and erase some of that because I don't want to blow out the mids. And I do want to add just a little bit of white on her. There we go. I like Robert's hat kind of meeting a little bit of that white. And then let's just do like another little subtle indication of light here. Oh, that's too much. We're almost done with this page, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very excited about kind of finishing this up. I hope you guys are having a really, successful art day. Or getting a lot done. I know that if I know Chris is probably packing if you guys are doing Comic-Con. I'm very excited for you though, man. Best of luck on your panel. I wish I could be there. That'd be fun. I haven't gone to con in like forever in Comic-Con. Like that is one of the funnest conventions to attend too. Let's see here. All right. And I think I'm actually at a point where I can just add, I want to add just a little bit of light here just to kind of reinforce that this is a window. I think we'll add just a tiny bit here and then a little bit more detail on his hand. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, kind of want it a little sloppy. That's a little too much. I want it just as a slight indication. And add just a little bit to the coins. Okay. Again, reinforcing that this is a window, I think would be helpful. Just a little bit of detail, a little bit of light, very subtle. Maybe this can kind of go back a little bit. Love it. And then we just have to add just like a slight bit of subtle light, this time maybe coming from the left. Maybe a little too much there. Maybe the plant. They're kind of in shadow now, so I don't want to add a lot to them. Maybe just a little bit. Again, we can kind of add a little bit to the ticket booth. Make it kind of clear that it's in shadow. And maybe just give a little bit of depth to this ground. And I think that'll do it. Did we overdo it on that ticket booth? I think we're good. I think I'm going to call it. So that's going to do it for this stream. Thanks to everybody who's watched this. I'm pretty happy with this page. I'm going to call that done. Joshua Kemble. Yes. Gary with a shout out to yesterday's. Chris said, I'm going to live Kid Josh's dreams by dressing as Indy this year. Nice. I love it. Chris said, got a Marion and Kiddo as the monkey too. Awesome. Nice. Thomas said, I heard there's not as much Hollywood at Comic-Con this year, so hopefully more room for comics. I agree. All right, guys. Well, if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit that bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Make sure you hit that like button. If you have the time and are so inclined and like comic books and you haven't picked up 2 stories or Jacob's Apartment, go buy one right now. You will not regret it. They're comics I spent quite a bit doing, quite a bit of time, put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in those things, and they're both available. So I highly encourage you guys. There's links in the notes to be, where you can purchase those. You can also just look on Amazon or just go through my website, joshuakemble.com. Thanks to everybody who's watched this stream. Chris, have a good time at Comic-Con. Watch Gary Hodges on Jim Luhan's channel. Then you'll understand the context of the Joshua Kemble. And with that, we're going to close out. I will see you guys on the next live stream. Goodbye. Thanks to everybody who tuned in.